Imagine stepping into a time capsule, not, way back to the dinosaurs, but to a time grappling with things that feel, well, pretty familiar today. Political instability, economic stress, maybe a sense of moral drift. Now picture one person, centuries ago, stepping up with a whole blueprint for reform. And his ideas, they still really resonate. Today we're doing a deep dive into Shah Waliullah. He was an 18th century Islamic reformer from the Indian subcontinent, a really fascinating figure. We've gathered quite a stack of sources, academic research, historical texts, to try and unpack his vision for, well, everything. Society, religion, economics, education. Our mission really is to pull out the key nuggets of wisdom from his work and help you see why it might actually be surprisingly relevant for you today. Okay, so to really get Shah Waliullah's impact, we first need to picture the India he lived in. The Mughal Empire, once this huge power, was crumbling, right? What was actually happening on the ground back then in the 18th century? What did it look like?
It's pretty striking when you look at the scale of the challenges. Politically, chaos. The central power in Delhi was just fading fast. You had rulers changing constantly, losing that, wisdom and insight they once had. And then regional powers like the Marathas and Sikhs, they were rising up. And brutal events like Nadir Shah's sack of Delhi in 1739. I mean, that wasn't just some random raid. It shows a total lack of control. People were terrified. The whole empire felt like it was just spiraling downwards.
Wow, just complete political breakdown. So how did that chaos, that instability, trickle down? How did it affect ordinary people's lives, their morals even?
That's a really critical connection he made. How do political and economic problems fuel moral decline? Shah Waliullah saw it everywhere, widespread moral issues. And he didn't see it in isolation. No, he linked it directly to the economy. People were, idle, honest work was scarce, but the nobility. Rampant extravagance, spending wildly while the state treasury was empty.
So the rich were living it up while the state was broke.
Exactly, which meant crushing taxes on ordinary folks. Farmers, artisans, he saw this feudal setup. Land belonged to the kings, the nobles, peasants. They carried this huge burden, just working endlessly to pay up. Even scholars and Sufis who should have been contributing were just drawing state funds without doing much, a real drain.
It sounds like a totally vicious cycle. And I guess education wouldn't escape that kind of environment either.
Not at all. Education suffered badly too. The focus had kind of drifted away from the core Islamic sciences like hadith studies, the Prophet's sayings and actions. Instead, they focused more on worldly sciences, often taught in mosques or noble homes, sure, but the deep dive into the Quran, into hadith, that was neglected, big time. So you had this intellectual stagnation setting in right alongside the political and social decay, a crisis on all fronts, really.
Okay, so against this really bleak backdrop, this figure emerges. Let's talk about Shah Waliullah himself. Born in 1703, impressive lineage, right? Tracing back to Umar bin Khattab on his father's side, he got his early education at his dad's school, Madrasa Rahimia, in Delhi. And then when his father died, Waliullah was only 17, he actually taught there for 12 years. Theology, logic, philosophy.
Yeah, and looking at the bigger picture, his path wasn't just books, it was deeply spiritual too. A really key moment, maybe the key moment, was his trip to Mecca and Medina around 1730. He stayed about 2 years studying hadith under a famous scholar, Shak Abu Tahir, and that's where he really developed this deep respect for Imam Malik's Muwatta, the hadith collection. He even wrote 2 commentaries on it later. That time abroad, it profoundly shaped him.
And didn't he have some kind of significant dream while he was there, something that really cemented his path?
Yes, a very symbolic one he described. In Mecca, 1731, he dreamt the Prophet's grandsons, Hassan and Hussein, visited him. Hassan gives him a pen, says it belonged to the Prophet, but the point's broken. Then Hussein mends the pen and puts the striped cloth, also the Prophet's, over him.
Wow.
Yeah. He saw it as like a divine sign, expanding his ability for religious writing, giving him this inspired mission. So when he returned to India in 1732, it wasn't just coming home. His work shifted dramatically. Less teaching various subjects, more intense focus on writing, tackling these complex religious issues. His lectures apparently changed completely. Like, his purpose was crystal clear now.
So, armed with this new clarity, this divine nudge, what did he target first for religious reform? Where did he start?
His core idea was simple but powerful. Knowledge only matters if you understand it and use it. Apply it. So one of his biggest projects, truly radical for the time, was translating the Quran out of Arabic into Persian.
Because Persian was what educated Muslims in India actually spoke day to day.
Exactly. He wanted to give them direct access, cut out the middleman, free them from relying on scholars who were often, frankly, opposed to his reforms. He also wrote a lot on hadith, emphasizing how crucial it was. He even put Imam Malik's Muwatta ahead of some other famous collections. He became a top-tier hadith scholar, a muhaddith.
That's fascinating. And he wasn't afraid to challenge things people were actually doing, right? Specific practices he saw as problematic.
Oh, completely fearless. He went after what he called sinful innovations and polytheistic practices, things he felt Muslims had picked up from their non-Muslim neighbors, like giving divine honors to saints' graves, bowing down to spiritual guides, decorating shrines with expensive stuff, holding festivals in graveyards, even organizing musical concerts for saints, treating them like guardian spirits almost. He kept hammering home Tawhid, the absolute oneness of God. That was the bedrock. And he didn't shy away from critiquing Sufism either, not dismissing it, but trying to purify it, remove elements he thought led people astray from God and the Prophet. He even waded into those really complex Sufi debates, like Wadatul Wujud versus Wadatul Shubh.
The unity of existence versus the unity of apparentism. Those sound deep.
They are. Very philosophical. He tried to bridge them, basically arguing they were different ways of experiencing the same ultimate reality if understood properly. Quite a contribution.
And he also got into legal interpretation. That's always a tricky area for reformers. Ijtihad versus taqlid.
Right. Independent reasoning versus just following tradition. He wrote about this too. His view is nuanced. Look, if you're a lay person, follow a recognized imam, a legal expert. Makes sense. But if you are knowledgeable in Islamic law, you can and should use your own judgment, ijtihad, as long as it lines up with the Prophet's practice and the core principles. He also tackled politically sensitive stuff like Shia-Sunni differences. His work, Izalat al-Khifa, aimed to justify the succession of the first four caliphs using scripture and history, trying to diffuse a really divisive issue by going back to the sources.
It's striking how his vision wasn't just confined to the mosque or the library. He saw this deep link between moral problems and the economy. So what was his prescription? What kind of economic and social setup did he envision?
He was incredibly forward-thinking here, really ahead of his time. He slammed the feudal system, all that concentrated wealth and power. But he also criticized early forms of capitalism he saw emerging, saying they just benefited a tiny few and were ruining the country. What he wanted was an economy that worked for everyone, for humanity. More production for the masses, yes, but also fair distribution. His famous line was, the market to be for the people and not the people to be for the market.
Wow. That still sounds radical today, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Thinking about wealth concentration and economic justice debates now.
It really does. These aren't new problems.
Did he get specific about economic practices he disliked?
Oh, yeah. He condemned usury, charging interest outright, said it killed interest in farming and crafts, just fueled greed, gambling too. Called it basically stealing wealth through trickery. He stressed having a healthy state treasury but funded by fair taxes, tax the wealthy, those with growing businesses, but only on income above basic needs, and that money. Spend it for the common good. He really believed in balance, avoiding extreme poverty and extreme wealth, a fundamental law for a healthy society, he thought.
And this ties into his theory of Revivalism. That sounds like a key part of his social thinking. Can you unpack those stages for us?
Absolutely. It's central to his social philosophy. He studied societies and saw these 4 stages of development. The Urtifikat, Stage 1, primitive society, just basic survival, food, clothes, shelter, getting by. Stage 2, urban society, cities grow, customs develop. Ideally, you have wise leaders, but it's easy for factions to take arm if there's no strong central control. Stage 3, nationalism. Bigger communities form nations. You get political order, hopefully a just ruler. Needs cooperation to work. And the final stage, stage 4, the universal state. This needs a unifying figure, like a Khalifa he suggested, to create this international setup aiming for human perfection and global justice.
That's quite a grand vision, from basic survival to global justice.
It is. And importantly, these stages aren't just a historical sequence. The higher stages provide ideals to improve the lower ones. They interact.
It's a complex framework. How did he suggest people actually use this, especially if society feels like it's stuck or even going backwards?
That's the practical genius of it. He said, look, if you can't manage stage 4, the universal state right now, focus on improving stage 3, the national level. Make that better if you lose stage 3. Focus on stage 2, the cities, the local communities, work your way back up.
So take practical steps where you can actually make a difference.
Exactly. It encourages realistic action. And he stressed these institutions, national, international, they only work if they actually function properly, if they root out crime, corruption, exploitation. It's a call for deep, fundamental reform, not just tinkering around the edges. He saw fair labor distribution and just taxation as the absolute bedrock.
Moving beyond faith and finance, Shah Waliullah also had a really clear vision for education. What was the ultimate goal of learning for him? How was it different from what he saw around him?
For him, education wasn't just about stuffing heads with facts. Not at all. It was about character building and social efficiency, making people capable contributors. But the ultimate aim, preparing the soul for eternal bliss. So the Quran and Hadith weren't just religious texts. They were guides for complete living, covering everything. It was holistic.
A complete blueprint for life, essentially.
Really much, aiming for someone spiritually fulfilled and socially effective.
And his view on kids, on child nature, was quite different too, wasn't it? Especially for that era.
Yeah, really interesting. It pushes back against ideas like original sin that were prevalent elsewhere. He believed in fitrat, the essential goodness of child nature. Every child is born pure, potentially perfect. He defined this fitrat as having four key parts: purity, humility before God, liberality or generosity, and a sense of justice.
So kids start out good.
That was his view. He argued it was parents and society that primarily shaped a child's religious identity and character later on. He wasn't about suppressing natural urges, but strengthening what he called the angelic urge within us.
That's a really positive philosophy. How did that translate into the classroom at his own school, Madrasa Rahimia?
Yeah.
What did education actually look like there?
He walked the talk. He totally revamped the curriculum, put Quran and Hadith study right back at the center where he felt they belonged. But interestingly, he also included physical education, that holistic view again, mind and body. He pushed for deep understanding of the original texts, not just relying on commentaries all the time, critical thinking, and the atmosphere. He wanted teachers who were self-sacrificing, genuinely cared for students, no profit motive. Crucially, it was open to all classes, and bright students from poorer backgrounds. They often got scholarships, funded by rulers and nobles like Najib Baudolah, who apparently supported 900 scholars.
900, wow.
Yeah, it was a model aiming for both fairness and high standards.
So bringing this all together, what's the lasting picture? Shah Waliullah, though, seems like this pivotal figure, right? A bridge between older Islamic thought and modern ideas. People have called him a precursor to Karl Marx for his economic ideas, the father of Muslim modernism. His work just radiates knowledge, insight, but also moderation and tolerance. And always that focus on adl, justice.
Absolutely. He was a realist politically, but offered this incredibly clear, integrated vision across the board: society, religion, ethics, politics. And if we connect it all up, I think his core enduring message is this: all these problems we face, political, economic, social, moral, religious, they're not separate boxes, they're all interconnected. You need a holistic approach.
Right.
He gave a structured way to think about that, arguing that real change comes from understanding and applying knowledge, guided by strong ethical values. That belief in basic human goodness, fitrat, combined with his practical solutions, it still feels like a powerful framework for our world today. With all the information overload, the division, the economic gaps. His theory of ertifakat, that emphasis on a value-based system, that's his real lasting contribution, I think.
It really makes you think. His theory of ertifakat suggests that when those big, top-level goals seem impossible, the smart move is to focus on strengthening the foundations. So here's something to ponder. If you take that idea and apply it to a major challenge we face globally today, maybe climate change, maybe deep political divides, what are the lower stages, the foundational things we could focus on improving right now? That might help us eventually build towards that more just, more thriving global society he envisioned.